Okay, so today on the podcast, we are answering a listener question, and that is, are you raising your daughter to become a career woman or a homemaker and wife? So anyways, I thought that was an interesting question, not only because because it's interesting, but because I have seen this exact same question asked to multiple people that I follow online, and it's been kind of interesting to hear their responses. One gal said specifically, she goes, well, I'm not raising her to be either. She could be whatever she wants to be. And I thought, well, if you don't have the target in mind, then you're going to miss it every time. And I do think we should have objective goals for our daughters. But how do you kind of navigate that in the 21st century where there are all these career opportunities, and obviously motherhood is a big blessing, and being a wife and all those things. So we're going to talk about that today on the podcast. That's it. If you guys enjoyed this episode, we have loved seeing you share in stories which episodes you guys enjoy when you take a screenshot and you share it with the people in your life. Not only does that help grow the podcast, but it also is so encouraging for us to see what you are currently enjoying, what's resonating with you, and just it makes us feel a little bit more a part of your community. So thank you for being here with the Now That We're a Family podcast, and we're going to dive in.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting. You were just talking to Katie about the that perspective of I'm not raising my daughter to be either one, not a career woman or not a housewife. I'm just going to let her be whatever she wants to be. And I think that with parenting in general, that has kind of like this nice feeling on the surface of like, well, they are going to be able to, through self-discovery, find out who they were meant to be, who they were made to be, in their own unique offering that they have to this world. The problem is that something or somebody or multiple peoples and multiple things are going to be shaping their worldview and shaping them into something. And if we're not proactive in doing that as parents, then again, somebody else is. Maybe it works out because it's the church that's doing that, or it's a godly influence that is influencing their desires and who they want to be and how they want to live that out. But oftentimes when we abdicate that role that we have and responsibility that we have in shaping our children in ways that God has told us to shape them, and giving them attributes and appetites and desires that are based in Scripture and with what God has declared to be good, then non-Christian voices are the ones that end up shaping them. Godless voices are the ones that end up shaping their appetites, whether that's through the public education system or whether it's through arts and entertainment, through literature. All those things are teaching our kids something, and they're telling our kids, hey, be this way or don't be that way, or this is cool and that's not cool. And so I think it's of the utmost importance that we take the responsibility seriously as parents in being the prominent voice. Not the only voice. We want to find other resources and find other people that can speak into our children's lives. But when they're young, being the prominent voice of speaking into their identity, saying, this is who you are in Christ. This is who he's made you to be. He's made you a boy. He's made you a girl. He's made you, he brought you into this family. I love the whole Unchangeable song that we learned growing up. One, I'm one of a kind. Two, for my mom and dad. Like there are these attributes that God has given you that are unchangeable, and we are going to lean into those, and we're going to seek out and sift out and kind of try to mine all the blessings that God has in all those things.
Yeah, and I do think too, I'm really glad this question was asked. Our daughter's only 5 years old. We have one of them. And I think that as parents, we play a shepherding role in our child's life and a guiding role in our child's life. And so I want to continually be seeking and praying for wisdom. But if we don't have some kind of clear filter to kind of filter opportunities through, our daughter's going to have a lot of opportunities in her life. And Lord willing, she's going to see us as people that she wants to come to ask questions to and be like, should I take this opportunity? Should I not? Is this something that I should invest my time in? Should I not? I know that I did that with my parents, and I was so grateful for their wisdom and the way that they'd really thought out the value system that God has placed in Scripture. So they were able to have this clarity even at times when I didn't have that clarity on, well, Katie, this is kind of what we see here. And I was able to rule out a lot of opportunities that wouldn't have been as helpful to me in my life today. And I don't think if my parents had just kind of been like, well, it's your life. Does it sound good? You do it. I wouldn't have been able to benefit from their wisdom and them thinking through, well, is this really going to be a great opportunity for our daughter? Or is it maybe going to jeopardize something that she wants in the future or inhibit something that we see the Lord has placed on her heart? So I do think it's a worthy thought process to think through when it comes to our children, even though they're all unique and they're going to have different opportunities and goals and giftings and all those things. What are kind of some guidelines that we might have for how we're going to filter our advice when it comes to our children as they enter young adulthood?
Yeah. And it's crazy. Even as you're saying that, when I think of having I can't remember what you said, but you said something along the lines of when you don't know what the target is, you're going to most of the time miss it. Or
you hit it. I think I probably said it wrong. I think you hit it every time or you miss it every time.
I don't know if there's like a real quote with that. It's like when you don't know what you're aiming at, you hit it 100% of the time or something. I don't know. The point is that like when you are not clear on your objective, then who's to say when you're wandering towards it or away from it? And that's oftentimes why we choose to not have definitive goals and objectives, is because it's too obvious when we're failing to meet those things. But when we have clear objectives as a married couple, within our marriage, within our family, it's a lot easier to direct our kids in those ways. And you do this knowing that, man, of course man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his step. We serve a God that he's so sovereign. It's crazy. He is. When we say sovereign, he really is. He's that way. He's over everything, and every single breath and every particle is a part of his divine plan. And so you come with your desires, you come with your goals, your aspirations, and your capabilities, knowing like, okay, but God's over all of this, and I get to humbly serve him with all these desires submitted to his divine plan that he's orchestrating right now. But again, without some sort of a vision of what that could look like, then you are going to be tossed to and fro with what the good opportunity in the moment appears to be. And similarly to you, Katie, babe, as a young person, whether that's when you're a child or when you're an adolescent or when you're a young adult, the opportunities are numerous, right? There are going to be so many things that sound interesting. They sound fun. They sound like something that you might be good at and that might bring great change in the world. You'd be like, oh, I could have so much effect if I were to pursue this thing. I've got this gifting and I could serve the church in this way, or I could serve the world in this way. And if you don't have a big picture perspective on what it is you feel that the Lord has called us to as his children, first and foremost, and then what that would look like in the context of a marriage, and then what that would look like in the context of a parent, then you're going to make decisions that will oftentimes hinder those things long term. But if you have that filter of, wait a second, I'm God's child first and foremost, I want to live in a way that's honoring to him. I do think that marriage is placed on my heart. Of course, not every single person is called to marriage, but the majority of people are. And so if that's the case, if your kid's like, yeah, I think that I'm one of those people that's called to marriage, then you're like, well, let's make decisions based off of that being something you want to have be true in your life. Same with children, that you can kind of make decisions based off of those things being a part of your life long term. It is kind of nuts. I know you've got a bunch of deep thoughts, that you wrote down on this.
No, I love what you're saying.
But it does kind of blow my mind when I feel like a lot of Christian people, they are so diligent in their life, and I'm speaking broadly here, because I think this is just something that stands out to me when I do hear it. But it seems like it comes up pretty regularly, where people that have grown up Christian, they have been brought up in a Christian home. They've had a faith for a long time. They are so diligent in whatever their studies are, their career, and then they're like mind blown when they have children and how the two aren't congruent. And it's like, what are we doing? Like it was never thought about. It's like, well, did you want to have children? No, I always wanted to have kids. And yet it seems like sometimes fail to think of what that looked like logistically and where they had been putting their time leading up to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think foundationally, we would love to raise our children, all of our children, with a desire for marriage. Now, if that, and starting a family, now, if that just totally is not there, then that's fine. But we are going to encourage that desire for marriage. I mean, obviously we see it as a huge blessing in Scripture. We've been able to experience that blessing. We think it's a wonderful thing to aspire to and to look for a spouse and to grow into the kind of person that would attract the kind of spouse that you would love to have one day. And then plan with a future in mind of having children as well and being blessed that way. And obviously, we're out of control to a certain extent with our fertility and things like that, but we see that it's a wonderful thing to desire children. That's something that the Lord places a high value on in Scripture. And so we're never going to discourage or encourage our children to make decisions without that kind of a plan A in mind. We don't want them to wake up one day and realize, oh, I've made all these decisions that now are kind of shooting me in the foot when it comes to my marriage. Like it's making my marriage very difficult, or it's making having children very difficult. These are ideals that we want each one of our children, our sons and our daughter, to aspire to and to have as a long-term vision for their lives. And like you said, that doesn't happen for every person. And I think that fear that it won't happen for our daughters can have us give advice that is fear-based and that is not truth-based, and wants us to say, okay, well, they might not get married, or, the world's pretty dark. There's not a lot of great guys around. So maybe we just need to push her on down this other path and give her these other fulfilling things and kind of discourage that calling of marriage. But I don't think that is wisdom based in Scripture, based in just what we should be, I don't know, just like in the truth of the gospel. It's fear-based logic.
Yeah, again, you can talk about marriage. You're raising a person, I get that, an individual, but then you can talk about marriage in the way the Bible talks about it, and that is, it is an awesome thing that God has ordained. That, I mean, it's the greatest institution on earth. It's the institution that God has chosen to be the worldly model for His relationship to us. Like, can you think of a higher calling? Like, that's what what marriage is. And so, yeah, I don't think we ever should degrade that. Be like, marriage is awesome. It is the greatest thing apart from pursuing the Lord. Well, it's really in addition to that. Like, alongside pursuing the Lord, pursuing marriage is a really good thing. Now, also looking at with God's, the way that works, like you said, is it a guaranteed thing? No, the Bible makes it clear, he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor from the Lord. It says, a virtuous woman who can find. There's this unique challenge in it where it's kind of you got to be looking for it. You gotta be winning somebody over, and you've got the whole saga of what was it, Jacob? Wanting to get a wife. Was it not the one that ended up with Leah? He wanted
and Rachel,
and clearly it wasn't this given thing where it's hey, here's an amazing blessing and it's just going to happen. It's no, it's an amazing blessing, and you've got to kind of work it out down there. You got to figure out a way to go pursue it, which means sometimes it's not in the cards for every person.
Well, I think the fear comes specifically with daughters, because I think for our sons, scripturally it says it's not good for a man to be alone. So he was intended to have a counterpart. Men were not created to wander around in isolation. It doesn't say it's not good for a woman to be alone. So I do think that as a general rule, women can thrive better alone than men can. But when you see it like that, it's almost more of this encouragement to men to be bold, to seek out a woman. You have to be the pursuer here, right? Yep. It's this mandate to men to get out there and find a wife. But our women, or our daughters, are much more kind of reciprocators. You can let a guy know you're interested in him, but you aren't pursuing a man in the same way that men can go out, like our sons can go out and pursue a woman.
Yeah, which is probably why it is such a unique challenge this day and age, because it is, men have become so passive in that way, Christian men, where it's like they are not willing to make themselves uncomfortable. And I'm speaking from personal experience. This was me in my pathetic initial pursuit of you, was like not willing to put my ego on the line, not willing to look dumb to let you know that I was interested.
That's a hard thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and yet I think it is the thing that the guy's supposed to do. Like, he's the one that's supposed to be the pursuer, to be with the one making the effort. And that's so discouraged by culture now, just to be like, no, like, whatever. If it works out, it works out. And if anything, within Christianity, we make a mock of guys that they call them like girl crazy. And it's like, they really want to get married. They're going to Christian college to try to find a wife. And it's like, well, good. Like, that's really logical. Like, what a great place to go look for a Christian woman. And yet it's so discouraged and kind of made fun of in some circles, to be like, oh, he really wants to, if he's talking to you, it's probably because he's interested. He's looking for a wife. It's like, that's a great reason to be talking to somebody. And of course you can have tact, some people have poor tact and some people make it awkward and weird, but that desire is a good thing. And it's really good to want to proactively pursue a spouse. I think that I know I was this way. Again, it's probably Hollywood or just, fiction. You think something's just going to like magically happen. You're like, I'll be, stuck on the side of the road, and the person that comes by to help me, it's a guy, and he's going to bring me home to work on my car at his home shop. Do you like the story?
Well, it's kind of sketchy.
Yeah, no, it's a guy, and this is actually how the story goes. Okay, I'm making it up right now. I'm broken down on the side of the road. He's gonna pick me up, and he's gonna bring me to his home auto body shop, and I'm gonna meet his daughter. And it's like, oh my goodness.
It's a guy. I thought it was a guy coming to help a girl on the side of the road.
No, I was talking about it like hypothetically from retro.
You're going too much into the man side of things, though. I feel like we need to stay to the female side of things.
Hey everyone, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about our online music academy called VotebergMusicAcademy.com. Katie and I actually started this online music academy 7 years ago, and over that time we've been able to see thousands of students go through our courses and learn how to play the guitar, the mandolin, the fiddle, the piano, the ukulele, and bring music into their home. And we really curated these lessons so that you're able to learn with your child, or you're able to learn by yourself and then bring music into your home and play with your kiddos. We even have it so that you can, subscribe to one course and have 3 of your kids take the same course. So it's really cost effective, and you're able to go at your own pace and bring music into your home. Go to VotebergMusicAcademy.com and check this out. Okay, listen up. This is where it gets really good. If you enter the coupon code YouTube at checkout, you will get 10% off each month's payment, because it's a subscription. It's a reoccurring payment. So if you put that code in, then it's 10% off each month. So, that can really add up over time. So bring some music into your family's home. Go over to VotebergMusicAcademy.com. I'll link it below. And you guys put in that coupon code and go learn how to play some piano, guitar, fiddle, mandolin, ukulele, your choice. Okay, I'll let you get back to that. The point is that men have stopped pursuing and stopped being the initiator.
But there's still really great guys out there.
Absolutely.
Because we know a lot of them.
Well, this is what I was going to say. Yes. And so I think, and also with just feminism and all that, women have like made it so that you should feel dumb for pursuing a girl, right? It's like, why would you ever do that? Why would you think I need a man? It's like, well, the Bible says this is a really good thing, and we complement each other very well. Like you said, it's not good for man to be alone. And I even think it talks about I think this is in the Bible somewhere. Ready?
Oh no.
Going to this, I'm going to get to your points. But if a lady's husband dies, he says like it's good for her to remain unmarried, right?
No, if she's older, it says to it. So this is in Titus.
Okay.
I think it's in Titus or Timothy.
Okay.
And we'll have the reference down below. But it's saying if an older woman's husband dies, then she should just like be active in the church. But if a younger woman's husband dies, she should be encouraged to remarry.
Oh, okay. There you go. See, I'm glad you clarified.
I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
I'm done with my sideline thing. Let's get it back on topic. Katie, what do you got?
No, I think what you're saying is good, but I do think it is different with boys and girls, because if our boys were just sitting up on jacks, we'd be like, hey, you know what? It's not good for you to be alone. go out and find a wife. What are you doing? Just like moping around. Like, go do something about it. And I'm not saying that guys that really would like to be married can just immediately find a wife either. I get that there's a search and it can be a difficult process. But I think for a woman, I think none of us want our daughters just sitting at home daydreaming of Prince Charming and he never shows up and she just kind of wasted away or whatever. And I think that what I loved about this question was, are you raising your daughter to be a career woman or a homemaker and wife? Is that these two were juxtaposed in the question, right? They were considered as opposing options for a woman. And the truth is that a successful, well-rounded, well-adapted person is going to thrive in whatever environment they find themselves in. And I think that ultimately that is our goal for Lucille. And when I think of this, like whether she becomes a wife, whether that's in her future, and a homemaker, whether she is excelling in the business space, like we really want her to be well educated. That's going to bless her husband or wherever else she finds herself. We want her to be a problem solver. We want her to be a critical thinker. We want her to be excellent at time management and add value in whatever situation she's in. So to go into a situation and people are like, when Lucille's there, she's going to make things better wherever it is. If it's in her home, if it's at a event where she's volunteering, if it's in a business place, she just needs to add value. We want our daughter to be business savvy, wise with finances, to know how to learn, to be a lifelong learner, to know how to manage her health, to know how to manage her energy. There are so many things, to be well adaptable, to be good at managing people. Like, these are things that are skill sets that can go into any environment and that person just shines. And I think there are so many homemakers who did not learn these skills and go into the childbearing space and do not know how to manage children and don't know how to manage at home and are overwhelmed and burdened, don't know how to manage their own energy, and don't have any extra bandwidth to be able to give, to be able to be in a position of leadership or management of other people in the church or in her home or outside of her home. She just can't do it. Or she just, the concept of adding value is very foreign to her. And that puts a lot of pressure on the husband because she's not this, I mean, I think when you think of being a helpmeet, that doesn't just automatically happen. Like, a woman with a ton of skills is going to be a lot more helpful, generally speaking, than a woman who grew up and is like, well, I learned how to manage a home kind of loosely, but I am not really, conscientious of where my time's going and where my energy's going and how to maximize the situation here. That's going to be a lot more of a burden on the whole family than her adding value. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So sometimes we could, sorry.
No, keep going. Are you kidding me?
I guess sometimes we could think like, oh, these would be the skill sets that a girl would learn if she's going to like go to college and get her master's and become a lawyer or something. And these are the kind of skills that a woman would learn if she's just going to go be a stay-at-home mom and nurse babies. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the case. A successful woman needs the same skill sets.
I 100% agree. But what I would actually make an addendum to that, I think you can appear successful in the workplace without having a lot of these skill sets because the system compensates for you. The system's like, hey, we've got people in place and you're kind of dysfunctional in all these other areas, but we'll use your skill set here and we'll make you feel affirmed here and competent here. And then you're like, sweet, I feel awesome here. I don't feel awesome at home. I'm going to do the thing that makes me feel awesome. And I think a lot of times it comes from not being a well-rounded person.
Okay, so this is kind of funny because I actually wrote down a successful person is successful in any environment, and then I put a little arrow and put well-rounded person because I think it's true. How do you define success? Is success making a lot of money, doing doing journalism for a newspaper and then going home and eating a TV dinner and stressing out and not knowing how to manage relationships. And, no, that's not a successful person. That's not a goal that we would have for our daughter. A goal that we would have for our daughter, if she is in a corporate environment, is to still have the bandwidth to be pouring into other people, to be managing herself well, to be managing relationships well, not just doing a job and earning money.
Yeah. And it's pretty inspiring when I see all the skill sets that you exercise within the context of running our home, because it is like it is success. It's just exceptional in how you exercise your skills would be exceptional in any environment. Your time management, your discipline, your strategizing, your creativity, like you said, your problem solving abilities.
My problem solving. I want to grow in all these areas.
I'm also be the one that says it then. Your ability to add value in any situation. And so I think that a common lie is that, I'm not being able to exercise my gifts in the home. And it's like, well, no, I think that you need to develop new gifts and skills that are actually attributes of a well-rounded, successful person. And then again, will the appreciation be there the same way? No, of course. Like
maybe it can be.
It won't probably be as like instant gratification as the workplace is. I would say, as far as like young children, I don't know. I guess you could speak to it better than I can. Like you are a mother and you are around a lot of mothers, but I think there is an element of like when you clock into a job and you do your task at that, at that law firm, or for, like you said, for that newspaper, or at your teaching job, or at the hospital, you get affirmation for your task in that thing, and pretty instantly. Kind of like, hey, great job, you did your job today, and then you get a paycheck to, on top of all of that. Whereas I think a lot of the fruit and the payoff with parenting takes a little longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess when it comes to how we're raising Lucille, I mean, I'm speaking for both of us here, but I'm assuming we're on the same page. We just want her to be, first and foremost, a believer who just shines the light of God wherever she goes, and people just know there's something different about her. And then for her to have these practical skill sets that just allow her to thrive in any environment. And I think something we would not do is, we kind of touched on this in the beginning, but we wouldn't encourage a career that would be unaligned with a family vision. And that might be exorbitant debt. That might be many, many years of schooling where, say, you drop out halfway through and there's not really a payoff for going halfway. It's like all or nothing. My dad has always encouraged this think win-win mindset, right? From 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And I remember when, I've shared this story before, but it was very pivotal in my life because I was 20 at the time, and I just graduated with my bachelor's the year before, and I always wanted to teach English, and I was like, I don't want to do it on like a 6th grade level. I want to do it at a high school level, and so I need my master's for that. And so I went to my dad, and he had agreed to pay for my bachelor's, but any schooling beyond that I was going to pay for. And he was like, okay, Katie, let's just think through this. So you're going to do your master's. That's 2 years, even if it's expedited. This is how much money it's going to cost. This is how much money you're going to earn with a teaching credential at a local school, and how much it would take to get a return on your investment. Do you want to, at some point, get married and have kids? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, do you see that happening before you're 30 potentially? I was like, yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'm 20. And when I was able to see it all laid out on paper, I was like, okay, I would like to have babies before I'm 28, 29, 30 years old, maybe like 5 of them. So this kind of shortchanges my long-term vision, because I don't want to quit before I've gotten this return on my investment, but I know I would like to be a stay-at-home mother with my children. And I was able to just kind of logically, he didn't tell me I couldn't do it, but I was able to see this was not aligning with my ideal vision for a family. And something that I think is encouraging in that, and is that there are several expressions for every calling, gifting, and interest. And I think that's something that we overlook. We think, oh, well, my daughter has this desire to teach and she's always wanted to be a teacher. My daughter wants to be a veterinarian. She loves animals and wants to heal them. Or she's really good at, she'd make a great lawyer or something like that. And it's like there are so many different expressions and ways, especially now in the 21st century, to be able to utilize those gifts and interest. It doesn't have to look one way, especially when that way really is going to make having a family hard.
I couldn't agree more. I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to bring that up when it came to your desire to teach. And that is the lack of creativity that often comes in our society. Is you think, okay, if you've got this desire, you might even call it a calling, to go as far as saying, I feel that the Lord has given me this calling. And I think that's something that can be talked about and debated. But even if you accept kind of that expression of this is the calling that the Lord has given me, and then you go and say, well, what's the only way I can exercise this? You're being really simple-minded and you're not using creativity at all. And the world has created some systems, right? Whether that's in education and saying, I've got this desire to teach. Okay, get plugged into this. You get this schooling. You get, like you said, your master's degree in here. And then you get kind of put down this pipeline of teaching. And you're like, well, that's like one thing. That's one way I could express this desire that I have to teach. And the way that is most common is not going to be the way that's, actually, with pretty much anything that's most common, it's not going to produce above common results, right? You're going to get pretty common results if you do the common path. And when I look at the Proverbs 31 woman especially, she is unconventional in the way that she is utilizing her giftings. And I think that that's something that should be the desire of Christians, both men and women, is to think outside the box when it comes to exercising our giftings, whether that's in our home, in the family, out in the marketplace, to go above and beyond and be more creative than the average person. Like we can be more creative. Like you said, you can exercise all of those giftings, all of those, what you might call callings, in a way that is according to God's, I think, value system, in the way that he has ordained, kind of like the hierarchy of how we are to place our time and our energy without, forsaking marriage, without forsaking our children.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of stopped there.
Yeah, no, I just think this is something that's going to benefit our daughters and our sons, but over and over throughout life is when they come to this road, this Y on the road where it looks like they have to choose, and being like, how can I think win-win in this situation? How can I keep this option wide open and a great option still, and then still apply all these desires that I have in the meantime? Because what I'm not encouraging, and what was never encouraged in our home, so I have 7 sisters, so there were 8 of us girls. My parents really had their hands full with the girl raising process, and they still do. But as they were helping us navigate these things, I really feel like they did it well, where we were all able to desire a family and marriage one day, but in the meantime, we are very actively using our time wisely and in growing in areas that were making us more capable. And I think of that. So 2 of my sisters are married. All 3 of us, the Lord has blessed with babies and husbands. And so we're all grateful for that. But at different times in our lives and currently, actually for all of us, I think we've all brought in substantial streams of income for our families while putting our homemaking first. But we had the capabilities to bring in these substantial streams of income that were actually greater than if any of us had went and gotten our masters or gotten this, like, I'm not saying it's bad to get your masters, but I'm saying, we were able to do it in just unique ways.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It wasn't like technically the incomes that each one of us have been able to bring in at different parts in our life since being married would be called career salaries. Mm-hmm. They could qualify as that. And yet that isn't like the option that we chose per se.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that going back to that, it's because let's see, how do I say this? You have this value system instilled into you from a young age, where, like you said, when you put things out on paper and you said, okay, I would be compromising in this area of my life if I pursued this. I don't want to do that. But that didn't just shut down that part of your brain and say, well, I'm not going to ever work. I'm never going to have a value to add to the marketplace because this is the thing that I want to do. You got creative in finding different ways to exercise a lot of those desires and ideals that you had and those aspirations that you had. What I was going to say is I think you see Christian families doing this all the time in a really inspiring way when they realize, okay, we're going to have to be unconventional, like in everything. Like we're going to have to be unconventional in everything if we want to have the fruit that we desire, that we want. Like you want uncommonly good fruit in your marriage, in your children, in the fruitfulness in ministry. So you're going to have to look at things in an uncommon way. And you see this with dads all the time, make what looks like a sacrifice in their career for the sake of more time with their family. But it's crazy how when you prioritize things according to God's order and take care of your marriage and take care of your children and are effective and consistent in the church, it's like the fruit that comes from that is so much. Again, this isn't name it, claim it, like do it God's way and he makes you rich. But the Bible's clear on the blessings that God gives in a material way to people that are faithful, to the righteous man, right? The man in Psalms 112, the man in Psalms 127 and 128. You even think of the husband in Proverbs 31. Like he is a man that's sitting amongst the elders in the gates. He's spoken highly of. And obviously he's got some resources, because his wife's managing them. Like she's being a baller with all of their resources.
And I think that's something that's really overlooked. We were just talking about this in Proverbs 31, right?
Let's hear it. I don't know what it is.
Is that people want to say, well, the Proverbs 31 woman is out there making it happen. She's clearly bringing in money. She's managing her home. She's managing people. But I think it's really easy to overlook the fact that her husband is sitting in the gates, meaning he's well known, he's well thought of, he sought out for advice. He's not buried at home under laundry and diapers. Like no one in this relationship is like buried at home. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
In a like they're both being very fruitful, and she's still being his helpmeet, and that she's not just covering his name with her name. And I think sometimes we see that very popularly now, where we have these wonderful, I'm going to do air quotes, like strong women who are impacting the gospel or spreading the gospel message, or are very active in politics, or are very active in ministry, or all these things. But you don't know her husband's name. You don't care what he has to say. You only care what she has to say. And she's kind of dragging him along, or he's kind of like doing the bare minimum in the back, And I think that that's a key element that's missing. That's not a Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah, like you said, that piece there is, it's, again, that's, by all appearances, that seems to be the case a lot of times, for sure. It's like, the husband's not known in the gates. He's not the guy that's respected in the community that people are going to for advice. Also, when you look at the holistic, we do this all the time. When you like want eighth attribute from something, you're like, I'm gonna be that version of whatever, the man in Psalm 112, or I'm gonna be that version, this attribute of the woman in Proverbs 31. It's like it's a whole woman. Like it's her children rise up and call her blessed, and like she treats her, the people working in her house well, and she's good with and she's obviously an amazing wife. That's like serving her husband well. It's not like I'm going to be this version. It's all of those things, right? Like, and even when you look at it from that standpoint, from just like a time, you can't like skip ahead of, like your children don't rise up and call you blessed if you neglect them early on and be like, well, I'm going to pour in over here and then I'll come in later. It's like you look at, and this is the same thing with the righteous man, that has a fruitful family. You kind of see where your time needs to go from a priority list. And usually work and career is after, in order for it to get that fruit, it's got to come after the marriage and your children, when you see that long-term fruit. And that's something too that I think I want to be able to give to my daughter, is just a longer term vision than any secular or non-Christian voice is going to give her. And even a lot of Christian voices are not going to give her a long-term vision. I don't picture the Proverbs 31 woman as being like 28.
No.
You know what I mean? I don't picture her as being like in her 30s and just crushing it in her career. It's like, no, she's an older, mature woman. She's like the finish line. Obviously, it shouldn't even be in our later 50s and 60s. It should be, in glory with the Lord. But even if we move it back from where most people look at like their glory days, being like, oh, in my 30s, if I'm not exercising my gifts fully, then I've wasted it. It's like, are you kidding me? You're just warming up. Like the real fruit of your life is going to be shown later on. And so when you pace yourself accordingly, I think one, you start taking Sabbaths more consistently. And then two, you prioritize your time differently and you allocate your time differently. I see this in my mother. You see it in your mother. I see it in my grandmother's, in your grandmother that just passed away. It is so inspiring when people pace their life in a way where their glory and their pedigree and all of their, you might call it notoriety, is going to be late in life. Not, hey, look how much money I'm making in my 30s, or look what accolades I've garnered in my 30s or in my 40s. It's like, no, you're going to see the fruit of my life in my children's children. You're going to see it through generations of faithfulness and through a marriage, a faithful, fruitful marriage of years and years. I want that to be the finish line, so to speak, or the goal, being like, hey, this is this is like what we're working towards. It's not getting this degree and getting this career. It's way further down the line.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because a 2-year-old doesn't rise up and call you blessed.
Yes.
And there are seasons for things, and there are seasons to invest in things. And the Proverbs 31 woman wasn't necessarily going out and going gangbusters on the career and mending her wool and doing all these things all at one time in one season. And so if you're a mother in a season who feels like, wow, all that sounds very daunting and very overwhelming, and how on earth am I supposed to juggle all that? Like, I feel like I'm probably going into a season, I'm going into a season like that. As soon as we add another baby, I feel like I just go up to here just with basic management of our home, and things kind of shake for a little bit, and you have to be like, that's in this season. It doesn't mean that I can't be fruitful in other ways at other times in life, but it's just being faithful where you're at right now. And I think it's the same thing with even our husbands sitting in the gates. They're cultivating that wisdom and that knowledge that they'll need, so that, people aren't going to a 20-year-old and being like, tell me all your great wisdom, Sage. This is an older man too, who has years of experience and has that thriving marriage and has those children. We were just talking with Elisha's parents who came over to visit, and Elisha was saying how you felt like you shortchanged the value, or you underappreciated the value of your mom when you were younger. And you're like, I'm just so thankful for you now. And you were just praising your mom.
I was rising up and calling her blessed.
You were rising up and calling her blessed as a 32-year-old man.
Yeah.
And was he 13 years old? No, she was getting in his way. And so I think,
I thought, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the perspective.
Being the person who was, making him do all the things that made him the man he is today. And so I think that that's a perspective that we can have. It's just this long-term fruit.
Yeah.
And it's not investing in every single thing. We don't need to go back to school and raise the toddlers and lead the church group and, all these different things all in the same season of life to have a very long, fruitful life of ministry and abundance. And there needs to be different focuses at different seasons of life.
Absolutely. And again, you talked about this upcoming season, the postpartum season, each time, and this is baby number 5, but it hasn't really mattered. The postpartum season for all of our kids have served as that proverbial like punch in the face. You're kind of like, what's going on? And I think it's, like the Mike Tyson quote that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. But what's crazy is that oftentimes we actually don't have a plan as parents, as husbands and as wives. And then you get punched in the face. And you're like, well, this stinks. I don't have a plan and I'm getting punched in the face. But when you think of having a plan, or beyond that, maybe a vision is a better way to put it. When you have those seasons that are that are challenging, the postpartum season. Without a vision, you are going to toss in the towel like on everything. You're like, what's the point? Like, this is hard. This is the last time I'm doing this. I'm getting out of this situation. You've got to have that long-term vision. And I really like breaking down timelines and kind of like different perspectives on each one. One being vision. Like, what's the vision for our daughter's life? I want her to be able to, again, look at that Proverbs 31 woman and say, this isn't going to be when I'm 16. This isn't going to be when I'm 36. That I've got this longer vision. That are there a lot of things that need to fall into place that are like depend on the Lord? Absolutely. Like, I think all of our visions, we should acknowledge that. Like, this is the vision that I have for my home, for my life, for my family. And boy, yep, it's 100% submitted and entirely dependent on God's sovereignty. But this is what I have. Like, and I can picture it, and it looks good, and I can articulate it. And then from there, you make a game plan. You say, okay, I've got this vision, but then I make a plan, and then you grow in the capabilities or the tactics, so to speak, that can then carry out that plan. And I think that something that's really important for vision, we've got to get that from God's word or from very mature voices. Like, you've got to go to those elders. You've got to go to the people that have perspective, a godly worldview and a biblical worldview, and then, of course, the Bible itself. And then I think for the plan, in addition, so you've got your vision that you get from that biblical perspective. And for the plan, I think you can go to people that are still somewhat in the game, so to speak. Because often, like, the power from people that are older and sometimes out of the game, so to speak, like in the sense that their kids are raised, they're in grandparent mode, like they see things, that big objective perspective that is so helpful. Where it's kind of like, no, like, stay married. What are you doing? You know, like, that's just what you need to do. You need to stay married. But then you can drop down maybe 25 years to somebody that's 25 years younger, and they're in it. They're like, oh yeah, we've got kids that are maybe 10 years older than, you know, our kids, but we're still in it. And this is something that's really helpful. We can give you a plan to kind of get to here. That's been really helpful. And I think a lot of times you can get tactics from people that are in very similar seasons of life than you, and get capabilities from people that's like, hey, in real time, this is working for me. Like, I've got this vision, and their vision doesn't even need to be 100% aligned with yours, but you can grow in capabilities and tactics based off of their in real time growing in capabilities, right? I think you've done that. You're like, okay, I know what my vision is as a mother, and it's according to the Lord willing, a biblical value system and a biblical framework. But then when it comes to capabilities and how to optimize the home, well, you can learn from a lady that's fixated on, you know, maximizing meal preparation. She might not, who knows, she might not even be a Christian, but she's fixated on this thing. You're like, well, I'm going to take that tactic or that capability and utilize that for this godly vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you do this all the time. I feel like in business, like even the people that you're under in business right now, taking tactical advice from, well, my dad is the coach. So
He's
there is a Christian spin on it, but it's a secular program, you know, that's coaching you, and but you're able to see, okay, this is an area of life that I want to grow in, and they're giving you the tactics to get there, even though your vision doesn't always align.
Yes. And I think that's what I was going to try to wrap that up with. When it comes to our daughters and equipping them, we want them to grow in capabilities and in tactics to be able to add value in any situation that they might find themselves in. Of course, there are going to be blind spots. There are going to be areas where it's like, wow, I never saw that situation
perfect person
happening. You know, there was no way to prepare them for that. But you want to equip them, right? You want them to be capable for whatever they might encounter in this life, but you don't want the plan and the vision to come from a secular, godless ideology or worldview. And that's so often what happens. So we say, okay, we want to equip our daughters, and then you get them in a program that's just teaching them everything that's contrary to the Bible. They're telling you that being a mother is actually restricting you from being able to, you know, exercise your capabilities, and that, you know, being married, you're going to be under a husband. He's going to be domineering. He's going to keep you from actually expressing who you fully are. And so you're trying to learn these tactics, but in this framework that's totally demeaning and countering everything that the Bible says is true and good and lovely and of good report, and that you want to be promoting. So I think it's of the utmost importance that as parents, as we're giving our kids capabilities, they're getting their vision and their plan from the Word of God first and foremost, and then from godly influences and godly voices.
Yeah, and all of those, like when we look at Scripture, all of those are elevating the role of wife and mother. And so, yes, that is going to be the ideal for our daughter. excuse me, and if the Lord has another plan for her life, I do not think she will be shortchanged in any way by having that desire. I think too, this can come at different stages of life, and so we do want to have these full lives. I think of my aunt Jolene. She got married in her 40s. She had that desire to be married that whole time. She lived a very full life. It wasn't like life started for her when she got married. She wasn't just sitting there waiting, but at the same time, that was a desire that the Lord did fulfill. And I think I want to mention my sister Kelsey real quick, because I think that she's a awesome example of someone who desires marriage one day, but who is a very full life. And she's very successful. She has so many capabilities, and she turns those capabilities into value, and then she gets paid for them. So she's incredible. She manages large teams of people for catering, she's done it mainly with catering, but she produced 4 albums this year, had to get all the bands together, dealt with all that so much. She did an Ironman 70.2. Is that what you call it?
Well, the 70.3.
70.3
Yeah.
Ironman. She's traveling out of the country for 3 months this year. She reads a book a week. She's finishing up her certification as a nutritionalist. If you asked her, hey, do you have it? Is there a desire in your heart to get married one day or have kids one day? She would say, yeah. She still has bandwidth in her schedule to babysit and volunteer and help people and serve. And I actually think that that's something that we should encourage our daughters to have. If a career or a form of schooling or whatever it is going to max them out to here, and they don't have any bandwidth to be in that role of service in any way, then I don't think that that's ideal. Like, I do think we should be in some kind of a hospitality role as women, regardless of what else we're pursuing. I don't know. That might just be personal opinion. So, but if you ask her, okay, and what do you want to do over the next 5 years? Her list is a mile long, and it doesn't include getting married. Like, if going back to Kelsey, she has a game plan for the next 5 years of all these things she wants to do. And if the Lord brings the right man into her life, she'll drop this stuff in a heartbeat. She's not like overly committed to it, but she has this game plan. And I think that, just like little tip for the single women out there, that is way more attractive to a man when you have a lot going on and you can inspire them too with your life than you sitting at home and crocheting doilies. Wouldn't you say?
Unless you're selling those online and making $1 million, those doilies, you know?
You know what I mean, though? Like, a man who's actively participating in life wants a helpmeet, like a woman who's going to actively participate in life with him. Not a woman who's going to say, well, actually, I have this 10-year plan I'm committed to, and you're going to have to follow me around till I'm done with this vision. That's not super ideal either, I would say.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
And so that's unideal if you're like, the only way this relationship's going to work is if you get on board and supporting my plan.
Right.
But it's also not ideal if you have no vision for your life and you're just sitting at home, because just a guy knows that's not going to be super helpful to him in his life either. You know what I'm saying?
I do. Well, and I'm so grateful that that's exactly who you were and you continue to be, is you were developing yourself in so many different capabilities. We keep using that word, and it's funny how it stands out to me. I was telling you, Bill uses it all the time at father-son ministries. Like, this guy's really capable, or you want to grow in this capability. And I've been convicted in this area because I think I had this thing in my brain where it's like, well, this is what I do for work. And then other things in life, home improvement or mechanical issues or, first aid application, I pay somebody else to do those things. And I'm great that there are people that specialize in all those things that I can go, seek their expertise in. But how it should be incumbent upon me to grow in every capability that I can as a complete man. And I think that when you have that perspective as a woman, it's the same thing. It's like, are there certain jobs that your husband's going to do that and you want him to be able to take care of those things. But the more capabilities you can grow in, I don't know how that's not going to serve the family, and so it might look like, oh, you're just trying to garner credentials or more money-making capabilities for the marketplace. Like, well, maybe they do result in that, but these are just nice to have in life. And they're nice to have as a wife. They're nice to have as a mother. And if you prioritize them to a fault and that becomes the end goal, it's like doing this one thing really good and making a lot of money and sacrificing your family or sacrificing the home. Well, that's not good at all.
Yeah, it's like mic drop.
That's not good at all.
I remember asking my dad as a teenager, I said, what first attracted you to mommy aside from, her looks? And he said, well, something I loved about your mother is that she could just she was a super hard worker and she could just roll up her sleeves and clean toilets. Excuse me, I just have something in my throat. Or, just put on a pair of Carhartts and dig a trench and just help out wherever she was needed. But then also she could dress up and be the belle of the ball, be able to communicate very well, be able to engage with people, be able to host. And he was like, what an asset to have in my life, to have her. And that really stuck out to me because around this time, my dad was trying to get a job. And, my mom is at this point living on a 50-acre farm in a town of 600 people. She's raising her 11th baby. And she, you could kind of have this maybe barefoot and pregnant mentality with what she was doing with her life. She's homeschooled, she's at home. And my dad flies her over near New York, and they end up going to this bigwig event where everyone in the room is making millions of dollars, and it's this high stress situation because my dad's trying to land this position. And I remember him coming home and just being so proud of my mom and being like, she's the reason I got the job. Everyone loved her. She was speaking so well. She was so gracious. She was able to engage with everybody on their level. And she had all these skill sets that she had built up over time that enabled her to just feel right at home, not be intimidated by any of this, and just make all these people feel awesome about themselves, and make them feel awesome about my dad. Now, my dad's pretty incredible in his own right, but that really stuck out to me. Again, I'm 19 years old, and I was thinking, I want to be like that one day. I want to be able to live on the farm and do the homesteading life.
Be pregnant, barefoot.
Barefoot and pregnant.
Yeah,
and then I do want to feel like my husband's if Katie's there, I'm going to appear better. I'm not going to be trying to shove my wife in the corner because she doesn't know when to speak or when not to, or she can't really talk on a lot of subjects or all these things. And then two, I was like, I really want a husband who could do that too. Who's that versatile,
Well, you are that way, and I want to become that way. But that story's inspiring.
That
gave me chills just hearing that. And I was like, how cool is that? But you know what I love about that too? Is just, again, the timeline of everything, and that your mom didn't stop growing. Because she was in her mid-40s when this happened?
Yeah.
If you were
40s.
Mid-40s. And here's a word of encouragement, if anybody needs it, men or women, is I love that, again, the Proverbs 31, what a cool thing to aspire to, the Psalm 112, the Psalm 127, 128. Man, what a cool thing to aspire to. That, I think, implies lifelong learning. And I think it's so easy. I know I've done this time and time again. As I get to a place where all of a sudden I value something, I own a home, and I'm thinking, boy, I haven't developed any ability to manage a home as a man. When it comes to just the things that I feel like a man should do, repairs and garden and all these things. And I can start to resent my lack of vision in my teens and in my early 20s for not garnering these capabilities. But what's cool is that I can now. When the finish line is way down the road, you're like, oh man, what an opportunity for lifelong growth. And when you do it with your kids, it's so life-giving. And that's what you want to model to your kids anyways. That's another thing that I think is this common misperception, is that you just get to your 30s and that's who you are. It's or even younger sometimes. It's you graduate from college, it's this is who you are. This is what you're good at. This is what you're not good at. And I don't buy that at all. And I don't think the Proverbs 31 bought that either, and I don't think that I keep referencing all those people, but the point is that I just speak to guy because I know I felt this. If you're a guy and you're in your 30s or you're in your 20s, you're like, dang, I don't have any of these capabilities. It's like, boy, I feel that way too. We get to grow in all these areas and you can garner these. And it's the same thing with a woman where you're like, man, boy, I wish I would have spent the last 10 years differently. Like, you've got to think down the road and be like, what an awesome opportunity to be able to now equip myself over the next 10 years and to grow in these skill sets. And the fact that your mom was in her 40s and was doing that, and then what has she done since then? She's just continued to grow. And now she's in her 50s, and her ability to communicate biblical truths and to encourage people has only improved. And then she's going to keep growing into her 60s and 70s. And however long the Lord blesses us with life here on earth, it's like, I just want to be growing, not just for worldly ambition's sake, but to equip the saints, to encourage my children, to bless my spouse. And so, boy, I tell you what, it's so cool having a longer term vision, because you realize how much time there can be and how, like, I know what to do today. Like, if I want to grow as a father, if I want to grow as a mother, as a wife, I can apply myself today.
Yeah, Elisha's a huge inspiration for me in this area. If you guys watched our podcast a while ago where we showed your dream board, none of the things on that dream board were the perception I had of who I married. All those capabilities that you've grown in, that you've pushed yourself in, that you've become actually really good in some of those areas, were not a part of who you were when we got married at all. And I just think that is so cool. Or even, I don't know. I'm just very inspired by your mindset of, it's not like this fixed mindset of who I am today is who I am. It's, oh, well, I want to get good at this. And in the next 5 years, if I apply myself, I can be good at that. And I can be excellent at this. And that really inspires me to continue to have this mindset of growth too, because I can really fall into the rut of like, oh, well, I'm just bad at this. And, but it's an area that I value. And it's like, well, if it's an area that you value and that will serve you or your family, then why not start today? It's not like life's over.
Oh, you did that crazy. I mean, you did that crazy with, you did that in a big way. I feel like with cooking, like it was a known fact, like coming into marriage, it's like you weren't necessarily
all my siblings
all that equipped, in the area of cooking and preparing food. And it's like, wow, that was 7 years ago. I don't know. My sons say this all the time. My daughter says this all the time. Like, they believe it.
See, that's the blessing of a good daddy.
It's like the worst part of eating out any time is that we're not eating mama's food, because it's just the best, and you've become so equipped. And that's just one of numerous areas that you've applied yourself in and chosen to continue growing in. And it's inspirational.
Well, something that comes to mind for me, for you, is the jiu-jitsu. Because when we got married, Elisha was like, I do not wrestle. He's like not flexible, did not know how to move his body at all, and was going and getting just pummeled at the gym. At least that's what he told me.
What was the
I don't
truth?
like watching jiu-jitsu.
Nobody likes watching jiu-jitsu.
And now, 2 years later, he had this goal of like, I'm going to get good at using my body as a physical force.
I'm going to become a weapon.
I'm going to become a lethal weapon. And he went to his first jiu-jitsu tournament, won in both categories, took gold in both categories, and then a year later got his blue belt, which most people never get their blue belts. And then now you're like a competitive blue belt.
Yeah,
and I mean, I just think that's so cool, though, from like, he could have just been like, I wasn't raised wrestling. I don't know how to do this. I'm just, never going to be good at it. But clearly you valued it, and then you went out and you got good at it.
Yeah, and what it does is it convicts. It does help you grow in confidence, because we talk about the 4 C's a lot in the growth initiative, and we could do a whole podcast episode in the 4 C's and how you can apply that to the home and leading yourself and leading your family, and both men and women that can apply the 4 C's. But when it comes to something like jiu-jitsu, it might sound like maybe just a selfish pursuit, but I really felt compelled to do this for some level of ability to protect my children and my wife. If you ever, God forbid, are in a physical confrontation, or altercation, on the street. It's like, I didn't like where I was at 3 years ago, with the prospect of that happening. So that's a very practical reason. Then too, just like seeing my boys, their affinity towards this. And I didn't want to be the dad where it's like, oh, sorry. Like I play basketball. That's what I do. I play golf. Those are my sports. I play golf and basketball. And like, will I play basketball with my boys? Great. Yeah. We'll have fun. Will I go golfing with them? Sure. But I didn't want to have that limited thinking, that scarcity mindset of like, well, these are the only things that I can do. And it's crazy how now that's grown into so many different areas of my life where it's like, wow, I can become far more capable in basic mechanical needs, like, so that when we are stranded on the side of the road, I don't feel as helpless as I did last year, or in 5 years, I could be even better. And it's the same thing when it comes to home improvements, where it's like, boy, I mean, you see the cuts that I made with that table saw. That was rough. I've had some of the most internal, language issues when it comes to home improvement projects, but I've grown in that area because I see it as being something.
A lot of things around our house now.
The point is that this is based off of a value system. I don't want to just start talking about like, oh, this is cool because I did it. It's because, okay, I had a vision that I felt like as the leader of my home, these capabilities would serve me well. And that's what we're talking about for our daughter. And you think the same thing. It's not some arbitrary, like, oh, shiny object syndrome. Be like, oh, people think that's cool. I want to go do that thing. Yeah. It's like, no, this can really serve the long-term vision.
Yeah. And I like how you brought up scarcity mindsets, because I think, just going to that real quick before we close, I think that a lot of making this decision, like, we can help our children when it comes to a scarcity mindset, because they think that in this moment, this is all that matters, right? When it comes to, it seems like a life-changing decision to, like, this is the only time I'm going to have this opportunity, so I need to take it, even though it's going to stress me out or it's not going to be ideal for the long term. I know I had that a lot as a teen and a young adult, and I still have it, but it's getting less and less and less. Where Elisha and I now feel very like we flex that muscle of like, we've said no to enough good things, being like, you know what, now's not great timing for us. That opportunity will come back around, or we'll find another opportunity that serves us better.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we can help our children with when it comes to like, I need to take this career opportunity, or I need to take this schooling option, or like, it all needs to happen right now or it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Instead of having that mindset of, you know what, life's long. If this is going to serve you now, then do it. If it's not, and it's not supporting the long-term vision, then opt out. And the Lord will bring something back along the path if it's meant to be. And so I want to have that perspective too, because I think that scarcity mindset can get us trapped up in opportunities that were not real ideal, because we thought this was going to be the one time that opportunity reached out to us.
Yes. You're so right. I mean, my mom exemplifies that. Your mom does. I tell you what, I'm so grateful when it comes to raising our daughter that she has you first and foremost as her example. And then she's got my mother, she's got your mother, she's got my grandmothers, she's got your grandma Paula, I mean, she she passed away, but she's gonna have memories, and we can speak to her. Yeah, example. And Mama Joy. And it's so cool to see substantial fruit from all these women's lives, and to be able to point to that and be like, look how blessed these women are, look how highly esteemed these women are. It's really cool that there's real life examples that we can point to and encourage. And then also this is something that I think, I know we can wrap this thing up.
I'm not in a rush.
I think oftentimes we assume, like, I think it's so easy to just assume a certain value system will be passed on to our children. And it's just like, well, of course she'll want to, be a wife and a mother. I really do think we need to speak highly of those things the way God speaks of them, because the voice against them is so loud, like in everything. Like that's, again, going back to that opening statement, it's like, I just want them to be whoever they want to be. And it's like, no, like it's so crazy when you just start looking at the narrative in everything, in the news, in media, in songs, and in all sorts of arts and entertainment, and the education, and everything, in business, like in the marketplace, even in the church, like in every podcast, and like on social media, all of it. It's got this strong narrative that is not promoting being a godly wife and a mother, and yet God thinks so highly of that and esteems that so highly. So I think as parents, we do need to be extremely vocal in advocating those things and speaking well of them and speaking of marriage and family in a very high way, and then equipping our daughter to thrive in any situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing I want to tag on to is something that Elisha and I learned. I think this was from Tim Ferriss that you brought to me a long time ago.
Not a godly man.
Yeah, but the concept is great. And that is, when considering a risk or a decision, how long is it going to take you, like if all else fails, how long is it going to take you to get back to where you are today?
Yeah.
And I think that, okay, so maybe we have this fear that it doesn't look like our daughter's going to get married, or we don't want to set her up for, her heart to get broken, like she wants to get married and then a man never comes along that's a good fit, and so it doesn't happen. Like, she's not going to be any shortchanged in any way by desiring marriage, pursuing other things that the Lord has placed on her heart for her entire life.
Well, if she, again, I know you already said this, but I'll say it again.
Right.
If she keeps that in mind, if she keeps in mind that she wants marriage, because like you already stated, there are practical things that we can do that really can hinder that down the road. Like,
no, I'm not saying, I'm saying if she makes decisions in light of desiring marriage.
yes, in light of that.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm saying she should be making, I think that a woman should be making decisions in light of desiring marriage and family. And what is the worst case scenario if she does that her entire life and she doesn't have a husband, or maybe she gets married and she doesn't have children? Like, if the Lord doesn't have those things for her life, I don't think that's a worst case scenario. She's going to live a very full and fruitful life. And that's wonderful. That's what the Lord had for her. So I'm not in any way scared if the Lord doesn't have marriage for Lucy, and yet she makes decisions in light of desiring that. And she just fills her life with other full, abundant ways of pursuing, service and education and growth and adding value. And so, I just don't think there's any downside. On the flip side, I think if a woman makes a career choice that is going to inhibit her marriage one day, or saddle her with a lot of extra pressure or debt, or the need to have to pay off her schooling, or you know what I'm saying? I think it could be a lot more detrimental that way. If she makes decisions kind of being like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get married or not, so I'm just going to pursue this career.
Mm-hmm.
100%
agree with everything you just said.
Clear with that last part?
I think so. Yeah. Like there are, yeah, I think you were. I don't need to.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
like I've seen young girls make decisions and then really, really regret them because they did end up getting married. And now they're either hauling their husband around for their 4-year internship, which he's not real stoked about, or they can't have kids for a period of time because she's committed to something else, or they just have a bunch of debt, or all those things that I think are a lot more unhelpful in the long run.
Yeah, and I think in those scenarios too, I think, like you can bail on those things. I think that like if that can be awesome. It's like, you know what? In order to get my schooling paid for, I had to go fulfill this obligation over here. If I don't fulfill this obligation, we're going to end up with $100,000 in debt. And then you get pregnant. Oh, well, like, we can handle the $100,000 in debt.
Yeah, you
like
could
that,
pivot at any point. Like, we aren't saying like you're stuck, but I'm saying we wouldn't encourage our daughter in that option.
Right.
Like, if we're going to take the evil on one side or the other, right? Yeah. We're going to opt for encouraging towards making decisions in light of marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think the same should absolutely go for men. And my dad did this all the time. I know we're not talking about men, so I won't go into it. But all the questions your dad asked you when it came to like, well, how is this going to serve you? You do want a wife. Yep. You do want children. Yep. Like you do want to be able to provide well for them. Yep. Okay. This is when I'm seriously considering going to Berkeley School of Music, in Boston. Yeah. It's like, wow, okay, this costs $60,000 a year, and you will then be qualified after 4 years to make like $20,000 a year playing coffee shop gigs. and you get to go be with all the cool musicians and have this, like, how is this going to serve you? And you're like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, that's not going to serve me well at all when it comes to being a provider and what I actually want in my home. So I think just making decisions as a young single person in light of, I desire this. Like, this is a good thing that the God has called good. And again, I know it is different with the guy and girl dynamic, but
no, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I do think that it's the same. Like, we aren't going to encourage our sons to go into a career field where it's like, oh, this places a ton of strain on marriages. Yes. 90% of couples get divorced. You're never going to be able to see your kids. But it's the cool guy career.
Yes.
Like, we aren't going to be like, oh, that should be your first option. Really pursue that with all your heart.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing with a woman. Some careers are going to place a lot more strain on your marriage, put your husband in an awkward position where, it's just not ideal for the family, and then put you in an awkward position if you get pregnant. And we don't want our daughter to ever feel like getting pregnant is going to mess up something. Right? We want it to be like a joy and a blessing, and not be like, well, that didn't work with the plan. And now, I can't fulfill this obligation or whatever that I was committed to. Yeah. So anyways, hopefully that answers the question. If it doesn't, I don't know what to say.
Well, then we get to do another podcast on it if it does. Folks, thank you so much for listening. We are so grateful for any concepts and ideas that you share with us, because that's how we grow and learn and think about new things. We appreciate that. Talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.